The show is called In Pursuit of Feeling. The name came after the show, which is rare for me. Actually, no, I'm lying. It's actually very much on brand because language can be really difficult. I have a bad time naming things. A lot of my drawings are just called Untitled One and then whatever. But the show essentially came about when Noah Arts and Letters hit me up in August to do a show, and she wanted to show a collection of my videos. At first I wanted to make a new piece of work, but I'm really glad that I didn't, because also that video is going to take me forever to do. But also I think that showing all of those works in the way that it was done and the way that it was installed gave a lot of hindsight even to me in terms of the through lines of my practice, and I guess why I started to make to begin with. I grew up not knowing fuck all about art. My mum's a single mum, midwife. I grew up in like the suburbs of West London, but not really understanding what art was and what artists were. I thought that artists were like ordained by God, like celebrities or like superheroes. I thought that you had to be specially anointed at birth to do it. And I didn't understand that it was accessible to everyone. I think the first time I went to a gallery was when I was 16 or 17. And then again, I never even saw myself in the works that were being presented, both in terms of content, but also in terms of the people making, which again further alienated me from thinking that I could be an artist. But it was after like my first boyfriend showed me this skate video that wasn't about skating, that I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, why do I feel so weird? And weirdness wasn't like a bad thing. It was more of like I have this uncanny feeling in the back of my throat about this work, and it's conjuring up like something in me that I can't articulate, but I'm really fascinated by it, but I want to make it real. And so the only way that I can make it real is if I make my own stuff, because then I can identify that feeling in something that exists outside of me. And then the same feeling came stronger when I saw Sam Taylor Wood's Brontosaurus video when I was at Foundation, which is essentially like this man who's on ecstasy and he's dancing naked in his room, but it's like it's really slowed down and it's to like a classical piece, and there's like this soft toy Brontosaurus in the background by a radiator, and it was 10 minutes long, and it completely rocked my world. I had no idea what the fuck experimental work was, but it made me feel so intensely, and it felt so real, but I couldn't articulate it, and I wanted so desperately too. I think that at the root of all human interaction and human decision is a desire for something, a desire to connect, a desire to disconnect, a desire for anything. But in that present moment, it was the desire to make tangible something which I felt for me existed behind language. And I wanted to be able to identify that to myself physically, because feeling it in my body wasn't enough. I wanted just to hold it, or I wanted to look at it, or return back to it and listen to it. Which is, I guess, the birthplace of, I guess, why I wanted to make work. Growing up, I wanted to be many things, but an artist was definitely not one of them. But I had this desire to make tangible, the things that I couldn't say, because language can be so limiting. Like, I could clap the ways I feel about something, but I can't say it in words. And I have this saying that once I conquer language, I'll just be way too powerful. But yeah, that's what I guess the show is about. And I guess also what all of my work is about, being in pursuit of feeling, being in pursuit of the feeling, a feeling that always locates itself in the back of my throat, that I can never say, but I can try to in my work. And the show title, the show poster, is like an extension of that. It's this mosaic that I made of my mum's drawing. My mum's a midwife. She's worked in the NHS for like 40 years. She's recently retired, but she came to my studio, and she doesn't make physical work, but I think midwifery is its own artistry, like the artistry. And she made this drawing, and it's of this girl climbing a hill to the house. And that's, I guess, everyone, you know, we're all trying to climb a hill to the house. But in relation to my practice, that's what it is. It's like making tangible something that feels untangible, and in being in pursuit of that. So that's kind of the basis of the show. And essentially also it's kind of like a baby retrospective in a way, because it's all of the works, or some of the works, majority of the works that I made from 19 to 27, which is how old I am now. Yeah. So I guess walking from the first room, like all the rooms are being titled. Noah came up with a really good idea of titling the rooms as if they were big installations, which again they are, and titling them as if you title folders on your laptop. So the first room is called 84162854 EJECP, and that title is all of the house numbers of the houses I've ever lived in between birth and now. And then the letters are the first letters of my siblings and I's names, as well as my mum's. Essentially the first room is kind of my not genesis point, but like the beginning in a way, where I was making work from the stuff that I knew, which I always do, but the first thing that you always know is the family, for me at least. And so I was making work from my family, documenting stuff. Also having this desire growing up, being like, I'm watching so much shit on MTV and movies, and like I'm seeing people that look like me, but I'm not seeing myself. Because again, like black people have always been employed in movies to uphold racialized stereotypes, and I wanted to make something that felt divorced of those stereotypes and purely from just the desire to feel seen and understood, to be visible, and to have that reflected back onto myself, and to affirm that, I guess. And so the first room is an 8-channel video installation with the videos being sequenced. So the 8 videos were shown on separate monitors, each monitor being somewhat different than the other. And it was dotted around the room with the wires exposed. And there was this wire drawing that was hidden in the cupboard, which I love, that piece. And all the wires kind of split, the wire drawing, all the wires came out of the cupboard and connected to these monitors. And I was like, oh yes, because growing up my mum was always like, keep the family secrets, or what's going on in the family in the home. And so it felt like I was exposing the family home with all these different monitors around the room from this hidden home. Like airing your dirty laundry, in a way. But the videos, yes, were on a sequence, and so each video would play one by one, and only the sound would be continuous. When one video was playing, all the rest of the monitors were black, apart from this one video, which was kind of like this. It's the last video. It's called The End. It's on a video, on a transparent display box, and there was like this wire sculpture that I put in the middle, and that video was always on, and the sound for that and how the video started came towards the end. It was kind of like this Easter egg. And so with the installation of the show, in general, not necessarily only this room, but all of the show. I was very much more aware of spectatorship and the gallery goer than previously, especially in the beginning. When I made Pingy in 2019, I put it on YouTube because I thought that's where videos go. But I didn't really think that anyone would see it or watch it, let alone want to exhibit it. And I wasn't really making it with the intent for viewership, despite me putting it on YouTube. And with that came a lot of things. Many positive things, which I'm grateful for. But it also made me think about the relationship between video and the looker or the spectator. I found after the years after Pingy that I felt like, I have this thing where I feel like my work is like an exposure therapy, or a humiliation ritual, because I can only seem to talk about my lived experience, but that's the only thing that I know. And a lot of the genesis of my wanting to create is wanting to figure out things that are happening with me internally, which I think is a universal experience. I think that we're all going through the same shade of the same thing, or different shades of the same thing. And it's always been a place of curiosity or understanding or affirming. And so I can be quite vulnerable with my work, which I'm glad for. But then the spectatorship element over time became more and more difficult. Especially now where, you go into a gallery and people only have capacity to look at something for 10 seconds, or even outside of the gallery space, you go on your phone and we're consuming video after video after video. We're watching, especially now, the most heinous, craziest crimes against humanity, and then a meme, and then this and that. Like, there's no awareness to the participation of just looking. That's because things just feel so habitual, like scrolling or watching, and there's no sense of accountability or partnership or participation in what it means to look, or criticality or accountability in it. And so for this exhibition, I was very conscious of that. And I wanted that to be a trade. I first started thinking about that when I made the work MC in 2023 for my exhibition at College Tower through my phone. And I made this giant box, where you have to walk. It's also at the end of the show too. But you have to walk over to the box. And it's like this big, monstrous thing that is erected from the ground. I wanted it to be erected from the ground. And you have to walk over to it and step on steps. And so you've kind of signed, or the spectators kind of signed this unwritten agreement. And they've kind of inserted themselves in the work because they've had to participate to watch it. And that made me feel good. It made me feel like there was an agreement, or there was a contract. Like, I can show X, but you have to do X to watch. You have to do Y to watch X. And so there's this forced participation that's at play, which also then reinforces the act of performativity that I think is inherent in all human interactions, but also a line of thinking that I'm really interested in work, like the performativity embedded in social situations or in different spaces, and the expectations to uphold those social etiquettes, and just the disappointment that comes with it because you're just alive. And so for the first room, which is works of my family, works of joy, it's like the happiest room. It's like adolescence and teenhood. It's very much like the beginning stages of my practice. I have a combination of music videos that I made for my longtime collaborator and great friend Klein, and other music videos, and just earlier works. And yeah, it's a very music heavy first room, which makes sense too because growing up I'd watch a shit ton of MTV, and I was like really obsessed with MTV, and I wanted to make music videos because I listened to songs and I'd see storylines in my head, and so the first room is very music orientated, because I guess music was the gateway into all of this. Music is the best medium by far. And so then you move into the second room, which is called hallway. So again, it's kind of like hallway, house. I'm interested in houses. But then again, also, there's a passage too in that room, and you have the laptop showing Omigo, and in a painting called Bed above it, and a glass table, which does feel like you're moving through a hallway in a house, and it's kind of been domesticized in the way that the painting was hung. And also showing Omigo in that room, I was very hesitant to wanting to show it at all, but I think ultimately with that piece, and even with Pingy, it's like, in the next room, it's like moments of wanting connection, like the places we go to in order to seek connection, especially online or in a chat room, like being vulnerable, but also curating this vulnerability with a stranger too. Being in the glass box makes sense because it's just, I guess, being exposed. But then also being in a hallway, it's like that you exposing yourself is also something that you can move, like people can also ignore, like a family photo that you can appreciate, but it's there to decorate, and I guess it's like this vulnerability being decorated in that way. But again, with the forced participation element, you have to walk over to the laptop, and then you have to crouch down to listen to the work. So again, the spectator has to perform acts in order to get it. Crouching down, kneeling over, X, Y, and Z. It's not readily accessible, I guess. That's basically it. Like, I feel like video has become so readily accessible to people, and I don't like that. And I was really conscious of wanting to be anti that for this show. Anyway, you walk into the second gallery, the Pingy rooms, and I think that this was, again, probably the most difficult room for me in terms of content, just because it's such personal, difficult work. And so for that reason, I was like, okay, because it's so hard, I want these films to show on the tiniest screens possible, which is why we basically made a miniaturette doll version of the install that I had done for a museum group show that I was a part of last year. And so we made these small miniature versions of this house. And I wanted this room to be the most challenging for someone to watch. And so you have the miniature versions of Pingy and the first edition and the second edition. Each year, every 5 years, I make a new re-edit of the film. Because my relationship to my dad and cinema completely has changed. And film can be, especially when you're dealing with real, or the ideas of the real, because what even is real, it can feel so damning, and so finite. So every 5 years, as my relationship changes with my dad or my thinking around it, I want to cement that again with film. So maybe when I'm 70, I'll have a shit ton of movies and they'll all play at the same time down a street. Because you never stop thinking about your relationship to parents or family, and I want to cement that in film. But with the display for this, like, I want it to be so small because the work is so hard. And so you walk into the room and then you see this tiny screens, and so you walk over, but then there's no sound playing. And then you look to your left and then you see that there's headphones all lined up, all the same, and you have to walk over to the headphones to grab the headphones. But then there's also benches that look out to the windows that were in the terrace gallery too. And so there's also an option just to listen to the sound as opposed to watching the video. And so for me, it becomes like this 3-part thing that you can have to do to watch it. You get to curate your experience of it. Yeah. I kind of see it as live editing, like you're the cursor on a Premiere Pro and you get to move things around and X, Y, and Z. And if you want to, you can listen to the first edition of Pingy, but be watching the audio, the visuals for the second version, or vice versa. And I like the performativity of it. In an ideal world, I'd have a camera rigged from the ceiling and I can see the way that people are moving. But yeah, so there's a forced participation, but that room was very difficult. And then in the next East Gallery, we have Verses, but before that, which was showing with stimming, but again, there was so much sound bleed from the East Gallery pouring into Terrace Gallery 2, that even that became its own work as well. Me and Noah were talking about how the sound bleed from Terrace Gallery in East Gallery, so the Verses room, into Terrace Gallery 2 was like when you know that there's some hard shit that you want to deal with, they have to deal with, but you don't want to. And so sorry. So you can choose the party. You can choose to go into the room where Tele X is playing like crazy Battle Clash hip-hop beats. You can choose to ignore, I guess, your feelings and opt for something more enjoyable. So if I could have the sound bleed as a piece of work, then that would be a piece of work as well. But then, so you enter into rhythmic stimming room, or Verses as it was called. And you have rhythmic stimming on an angle, again, forced participation. I wanted this massive screen to be playing. I guess I know it's me, but whenever I make video pieces, I see them as a woman. Like I'm just a stand-in for that character, because I make work quite immediate, and I don't really cast, so I just use myself in that way, so I don't see it as me. So a woman dancing in her bed, repeatedly listening to the same song. And I wanted this to be massive, and to be oppressive, and for someone to have to lie down to watch it, or if, for accessibility reasons, like for them to have to go really to the back of the room to observe it. And essentially, the video piece is an endurance piece, but also like the most mundane thing in the world. But it's an endurance piece, the woman against the music. But then it's also the LED screen against the projector. And then it's also like an endurance piece for the spectator too, because it's shot transcendental, it's a structuralist film, and it's all about in endurance. And then on the flip side, you have the inverse of that with the painting and object installation, which I think is like is exactly the same as rhythmic stemming, but just in 2D form. The painting Me in Bed 2 was made as part of a collection for the exhibition that I had at Carl Chicago in 2025, United Kingdom, London, Portrait OYG. That one, I've got the name. But essentially that was inspired by Schrodinger's theory of the cat, which essentially was used to prove this quantum state of superposition, which basically means, or this theory goes, where there's a cat, and there's a cat in a box, and in the box there's a radioactive agent, and a nuclear and a Geiger counter, and the agent has a 50% chance of going off. And so you put the lid on the box, and is the cat dead or alive? And so the cat exists in both states of it being dead and also it being alive. And then I was applying that kind of thinking in relation to the bedroom, because a bedroom knows you. It's walls that probably know you better than anybody else, or at least for myself, because I don't speak for everyone. And thinking about performativity and thinking about giving shape, or who gives shape. I don't know if you've seen Doctor Who, but there's these like aliens called weeping angels, and when you look at them, they turn to stone, but when you don't look at them, they don't turn to stone. And I guess using both of those things, it's like when I'm alone, do I give shape to myself? In the same way that I give shape to other people. Being a good friend, being a good partner, being a good daughter, being a good civilian. Do I give shape to myself? And so that exhibition was these abstract paintings that had these spotlights shining on them. And then these structuralist videos of objects watching these paintings struggle with being tangible. And so the painting is hung on an angle for this show, in the same way that the rhythmic stimming is. And there's a spotlight shining on the painting, nodding to the show at Kashikawa, but also nodding to the projector on rhythmic stimming. And then you have these objects, again, nodding to the show, but also the previous show at Kashikawa, but then also the objects mirror the people lying down. And so it's kind of this, I guess, existential worry of, do I exist with value point blank? Or have I affirmed myself with value? Or like the cup in front of me has value because it's a cup and it has function, and its function is inscribed in the creation of it. But with me, have I inscribed function to myself that exists solely for myself? So that's kind of the installation painting. And then again, with the forced participation of it, because the paint's on an angle, you have to like bend down to see it in its entirety. And then to close the show, we have MC, which is in the final room, the screening room, and it's this big monstrous box. And MC was the only piece of video work that I actually made for people to watch it. And it's the one video work in this show that doesn't include myself in it. And I shot it using these spy glasses. And essentially, the movie is kind of like an anti-fable. With me, I always thought that wells were like these mystical things that you'd walk over to. You throw money in and you look at a reality that's better than your own. But with MC, it's made this well, and it's very grand, and you walk over and you're met looking down this plexiglass. In Kashikawa, because it was bright, you could see your reflection, or the spectator could see their reflection on the plexiglass that was above the screen. But I guess because in screening room, you couldn't see it. But you would see your shadow, and then you'd be met with the film that's being shot on spy glasses. And so it's your perspective, essentially, because you're the one operating, kind of like in a video game, like POV. And so it's a 2-part video vignette of you navigating through a house party, and then you watching a couple at a theatre, a movie, watching like a filmed play. And as you move through this room, you're acquiring, in the house party, you're acquiring knowledge that you hear from other people's conversations that you're part of, and then you end up in a room and you say all of these things to yourself. And then in the couple, you see the girlfriend wanting the boyfriend to leave so she could be alone, but then her also moving back and not wanting to be alone. And that piece is essentially about being afraid of independence and uncertainty with self. One, in terms of the things that you say, and then two, in terms of how you show up in a relationship or what you actually want. I guess, yeah. And the etiquettes of the house party, or the etiquettes of being in a relationship or being a person in a theatre, and not knowing what you want and not trusting what you want and using other people to gauge that for you. So that's basically the show. I hope that this has brought some clarity to it. This is the most special thing I've ever done in my life. And I'm really grateful to have been able to show and to also be able to revisit the works and maybe on some level remind myself why I make to begin with, because it hasn't been easy to say, even to myself, or give myself permission to make. And I think that looking at the works now and like with a lot of naivety, the desire to wanting to understand self has always been present, and the show kind of reminds me of that. Like, oh, okay, I'm trying to just figure some stuff out that I can't really articulate. Yeah, I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to watch this. This is so long. Listen, yeah, watch this. If you have any other questions about the show, please let me know. If anything, thank you again for showing interest. That means so much to me. And I hope that you have a really great day. See ya.